Running a business can be exhausting. Building your website shouldn't be. With Wix, you can express your ideas, give direction, then leave the heavy lifting to AI, from site creation to branded content and images. Have fun with the details. Customize what you want the way you want. And manage your whole business from a centralized dashboard with expert AI tools. Build, scale, and enjoy the incredible results. You can do it all yourself on Wix.
With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
Welcome back to the Basketball Show. We're pleased to be joined now by the first inductee into the Edmonton Stingers Ring of Honor, longtime Edmonton Stinger, University of Alberta Golden Bear great, Brody Clarke. Brody, how are you today?
Hey, Paul. Thanks for having me on. I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing great. It was nice to see you back in the city last weekend. Congratulations, Brody. Talk about what it means to be the first inductee into the Ring of Honor.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's honestly, it's such an honor. Like I'm still a little bit speechless from it. I think it was just an incredible opportunity to be back in the city and see, so many people from that part of my life, from the basketball community in Edmonton, and to be recognized among all the incredible people in that community. It just I don't know. It's really heartwarming, and it's awesome to know that it's always going to be somewhere I can call my second home, somewhere I'll feel welcomed, feel at home, and big shout out to the Stingers. This is it's really cool that they're starting this, and I'm sure there's going to be some other guys that are sitting on that bench right now who are going to be joining me in the near future. So it's cool to be the first for sure.
Brody, talk about your experience. Let's just start in Edmonton. You made an unusual decision in Canada. It's not typical for an outstanding player from Toronto to go out and play in Edmonton. What was it that brought you here?
Yeah, I mean, a number of factors off the bat. I think that, I'll be honest, as a kid, I really was trying to chase the D1 dream like crazy. And then I got to my grade 12 year and I had some issues going on with my knees where I had to have surgeries, and it started becoming very difficult to secure Div 1 looks. And as you know, that's a much more sort of cutthroat environment in terms of the money being thrown around and the time you get to show up as the Canadian kid who goes to class and make a name for yourself. And so as I started to shift my focus and start thinking about staying at youth sports schools, the thing about the Canada basketball community is it's tiny. And so it's very tight knit. And as somebody who had been, in a bunch of youth Canada basketball programs growing up, I was relatively familiar with the various coaches. One of those coaches was Coach Barnaby. And so he reached out to me early in my grade 12 year. I hadn't quite decided I was staying youth sports yet, but he just kept in my ear. He was interested. He wanted to know if I did decide to stay and play youth sports, if I'd come out for a visit. And then, of course, that time came around, and man, I came on campus, and within a weekend, I met all of the academic advisors I wanted to meet. I saw a bunch of the players. I saw the facilities, which, I mean, we talk about the Saville Center. You're talking about a Division I facility ultimately. It's probably the best facility in the country. And of course, you got a coach who wasn't saying, "Hey, I need you to be healthy. I need you to hurry up and get back from these knee injuries." He was just saying, "I need you, period." And that was something that spoke volumes to me. I guess as a kid, it wasn't obvious to me how good of a decision it was, but it made the most sense at the time, and I got to study what I wanted to study in school. But looking back now, I mean, best decision I ever made. I'm so happy I came out. I met a whole bunch of incredible people in the basketball sphere out there, and starting with Barnaby, it just it grew, and yeah, it really helped me blossom into the player I became.
You said something that I think is really key and very interesting, and a tribute to Barnaby and his philosophy, because as you went through your great career as a Golden Bear, you did have injury issues. You missed an entire season, as I recall, but everybody hung in there together. Nobody panicked. Everybody just did the right thing. Everybody, and by everybody, I mean you. I mean your family. I mean your family easily could have been saying, just get back out here, Brody. The coaching staff, your teammates, everybody, it seemed, circled together and rallied around each other, and everybody was in it with the right commitment, Brody, and in it for the long haul together.
Yeah, it's such a valuable thing. I mean, you don't get to find a lot of places in the basketball world where it's more about the wholesome experience of the student athlete than it is about the athlete or than it is about the student. It's, okay, how do we make all these things, pull in the same direction and grow together in the best way for that kid, and give them as much support and love and opportunity as they can get from top to bottom, right? This is something that I think Barnaby held as a value. This is something that, I'm sure Greg and Horwood held as values before him. This is something that the entire Edmonton and specifically U of A Golden Bear basketball community sees as important. And you see it not just in people like me who come through for the 10 years, but in everybody who's kids that come out of Edmonton and play for U of A, kids that come up from the U.S. and played for the U of A in the past. Everybody who comes through the program ends up with this incredible, affinity for it and this incredible experience that's more than just the basketball experience they got. And that's something that you don't find everywhere. And yeah, I told Barnaby at my senior night, I remember, I trust him with my life at this point. He never looked me in the eyes and told me something that wasn't true. He was always straight up with me. He was always honest about what he needed from me, where he saw me going, what he saw as, things I can get better at, things I'm doing well already. And so having somebody in your life like that, at that level of sport, who is going to push you, but also support you and love you that's paramount.
What you've just described to me, Brody, is exactly what the post-secondary experience is supposed to embody. And yet it's a diamond in the rough, because as you also accurately describe it, that's rare to have that combination of elements work together as it did. And it's not like it was all smooth sailing like we touched on. I mean, there were injuries in there that disrupted your career. But let's come out on the backside. You came out on the backside after your outstanding collegiate career. You had the experience in the first year with the Stingers as the U Sports player. And I remember Brody Clarke, the rookie. You got some minutes. You made some contributions as the season went on. You got better and better. You started, I wouldn't say you ever felt comfortable, but you felt less uncomfortable as the season went on. But then you graduate and you come into it, and then you start making your mark. Talk about your journey in the CEBL, because along with that, you were also playing overseas. So talk about your professional journey in its totality.
Yeah, I think I need to take a little bit of a step back first, because a lot of that professional journey, the ability to sort of navigate the CEBL that first year as a developmental player, a lot of that stemmed from my relationship with Jordan Baker, and there's no amount of credit that is enough, but you got to understand, he started coaching at U of A, and I think it was summer of 2016 or 17, so we're leading into my third year of eligibility. And that was the first time where I was like, okay, almost every day in the summer, I'm going to text this guy, I'm going to call this guy, I'm going to figure out when's he going to the gym, when's he working out, what can he put me through something, can he make me better, can he turn me into a pro, because that's the guy I want to be like. And he took me under his wing. And so I learned over the course of a couple of summers, okay, this is what it means to compete at this level. This is what it takes to be like somebody like Jordan. And then the Stingers came around, and it was an opportunity to play with him and, be an understudy and really understand, if I want to be effective at this level, I'm seeing it firsthand every single day, how to be a pro, And so that first summer, I not only moved from being coached by him to playing with him, but I got to sort of experience what it took just through his eyes in a bit of a more philosophical way. And so I think that was incredibly important experience because, there's a lot of talented players coming through the CEBL year to year. That first year, everything was kind of in test drive mode. And I quickly realized, okay, that's an example that I want to follow. And I just sort of took that and ran with it. I came back the following summer as a full-on pro after my youth sports career, and I was like, well, here's how I have to comport myself. Here's how I have to, approach every single day of practice. This is how I have to approach every single game. I already knew a little bit about what it was going to take for me to be successful at that level because I got so much time seeing it firsthand. And then from there, it just kind of, it all trickles into the next experience. So you have a good summer with the CBL and the bubble. Next thing you know, you're in Germany, you're playing professional overseas, and you're bringing all those same lessons with you to the next team. And then you're coming back, you're playing in the summer, you're going over to Poland, you're bringing the same lessons with you the next year. And it just sort of, it compounds and it compounds and it compounds. It's a lot of basketball, but it was incredible. I think it was, it gave me a really solid, safe, comfortable home base every summer during my professional career because, I'd be playing overseas. I'd be in different countries and different cities. You're there for 8 or 9 months and you can never really even buy decor for your apartment, you're kind of a nomad. So having like a home base where I was around a bunch of people who I knew, were in my corner, whose corner I was in, it's a special place. It was a special thing. Stingers are always going to hold a pretty cool spot in my heart. My favorite place I played professionally, for sure.
Brody, the league's been in Canadian in the Canadian sports fabric now for its 7th season. That in and of itself is a marvel because so many attempts were made with minor league teams that just were not able to succeed for a variety of reasons. So it's great to see that. What do you see now in terms of the evolution of the league, the kind of players they're getting, the style of play? How do you see the league as it's growing and developing?
Oh, man, it's sky's the limit right now. I think it's kind of crazy to think about, when I was out there last weekend for the ceremony, just looking around the crowd and seeing how many people show up early to the games wearing their Stingers gear, the same people in the same spots from the last 5 years.
With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu. At Arizona State University, we've made online education better, smarter, and more personalized so you can go further in your aspiring field.
I decided to pursue medicine once I realized that ASU did have the online program for biological sciences. You're still required to learn the same curriculum. You're still being tested on the same content that anyone would be tested on in person. The comprehensiveness of the program prepared me so well for medical school.
Explore over 300 programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
Years, making sure that they're, getting an opportunity to interact with the players, getting an opportunity to see, us pregame, us postgame. That community building aspect to what the CEBL has done has been incredible. I think that you go to markets like Edmonton, markets like St. Catharines and Niagara, markets like Montreal, Vancouver. I mean, these are places that are starved for high-level basketball, and what the CEBL has done an incredible job of is made it accessible for parents and families and kids and, people who are maybe in high school level, people who are in university and hanging around during the summer to see high-level basketball in their backyard affordably. And with that, what happened over the course of the 7 years was it built a fan base and it built, a bit more of a consistent opportunity to earn some revenue and really spend some money on basketball in Canada and start bringing in more and more talented players every year, because it costs money to do that at this level, And so I think that for what I see coming next, I don't know. I think I'm kind of straying from your question at this point. But for what I see coming next in the league is like it's just a continued trajectory up and to the right is what I would say. Like there's more and more attention being paid. There's more and more teams being bought up by private ownership so that people can really start like driving change in basketball in Canada from the money side of the equation. And, every year more and more talented guys with NBA experience, guys on the cusp of the NBA, guys who are high-level G Leaguers or high-level Euro Leaguers coming and playing for their 4-month stints and liking it and coming back the next year and trying to make, show it to their families and bring their friends, let their friends know, hey, this is a great league. You should come and play in this league. I think that it's crazy to watch. It's like I was sitting on the sideline last Sunday at the game and I was like, I think I'm a year removed and this is like way too athletic for me suddenly. I don't know how well I would do anymore. It's crazy. It's booming and it's happening so fast. It's just really cool to see.
Well, Brody, you were one of the pioneers, if I can use that elderly man's term, but you were definitely one of the people that set the tone, not just because of the way that you played on the court, Brody, but I've always said this, you're a much better person than you are a basketball player. And that's a compliment to both levels. And you were such an instrumental part with basketball in the community, as not as a player, as an ambassador, as a person. And while we miss you in Edmonton, we're excited for you that you're back home with your family, doing what you want to do. And thank you for all that you contributed to our community and certainly to the Stingers. And Brody Clarke, again, first inductee into the prestigious Edmonton Stinger Ring of Honor. Thanks so much for joining me today on The Basketball Show. I hope we can do this again soon.
Thanks for having me, Paul. All the best. And yeah, man, let me know. I'll jump on anytime.
Okay, Brody. Brody Clarke joining us today on The Basketball Show. We're going to take a break right now. When we come back, we're going to talk about the Toronto Raptors and some of the stuff that's going on. And there's a lot of stuff to talk about when we bring in Ryan Wolstat from the Toronto Sun here on your sports leader, Sports 1440. Welcome back to The Basketball Show. Paul Sir, Ryan Reed, a little James Brown. You got to have a little funk in your life. Ryan Wolstat, Toronto Sun. Are you a James Brown fan?
Oh, of course. And I think, I don't know if I've ever been brought on a show with James Brown playing. I like it. I'm definitely down with that.
Okay, well, that's good. I don't know about the sex machine start of it, Ryan. You'll have to keep that to yourself. But welcome back, Ryan. It's great to have you on.
Heavily sampled song and rap in particular. I think that song's been sampled about 1,000 times. So it's a good one.
Yeah, and you don't beat James Brown. One of my favorite James Brown stories was the epic concert where he kept, collapsing to the stage, and then people revived him, and the Rolling Stones were coming on after him, and they were so intimidated they didn't even want to come on and perform. But don't blame him at all. So Ryan, we have, a lot going on in Toronto now. Masai Ujiri, what's kind of the vibe in the city about Masai leaving the Raptors?
I think it's a lot of shock. I mean, like the original plans for today's show, I was supposed to come in and talk about Colin Murray Boyles
exactly.
and AJ Martin, and we were planning to go down yesterday to meet these kids and get some first impressions in person, because we did talk to Murray Boyles the other day on Zoom, and then came the bomb, another Shams bomb from ESPN, and I mean the weird thing was I had kind of heard a rumor about it earlier this month as I wrote, but no one really was saying anything when I tried to follow up, and a colleague tried to follow up, and it was just, people were keeping it really quiet. So to me, I don't know if I was as shocked as most people, but I just didn't really believe when I heard the rumor. The timing seemed way off, and that's why I was just like, I really don't buy this. Like, I think at some point, sure, but right now it's just really weird. I think, the mood in Toronto is, I think people are upset. They're in mourning. I know there's a lot of people that aren't happy with the job Masai has done the last 4 or 5 years, or maybe until last year when they started turning things around a bit with their draft picks. But, this is a man that brought a championship to Canada, and I don't think most people ever really, if you follow the Raptors since day one, I mean, to imagine that they would get there, it was, it just didn't seem possible for a lot of the time. And plus, I think they were the fourth or fifth winningest franchise in the regular season for about a 9-year period. And that's just like, this is a franchise that had one 5-game playoff series win in their history when he took over. So yeah, I know, like it's kind of an icon. Like the whole press conference yesterday was weird because I've been to a million of them where a guy gets fired that didn't do anything or didn't meet expectations, but it was weird going on where the guy actually did do it. It was just a totally weird vibe.
Well, it must have been a weird vibe. And I think that what I've wrestled with and where I'm even struggling to verbalize right now is yes, the last 4 or 5 years, I think people have felt a range of emotions towards the job that Masai was doing. Like, was he distracted with all of his humanity? I mean, think of that. People are ticked because he's distracted with humanitarian efforts, bringing the NBA to Africa in a way that no one else did. The guy is just iconic in so many ways, and he did bring a championship here. And I do think and I'll run this hypothesis by you, if the Raptors had been healthy last year, for instance, if they picked up a healthier Ingram, if they had played together for a whole year, I don't think Masai Ujiri would be going anywhere right now.
Yeah, I mean, that would be interesting if they made the play-in and then maybe advanced to the playoffs. The thing, it's possible. I'm not sure. I think it may not have worked out either way unless they somehow stole around, which would have been highly unlikely. I think the question I was thinking was similar but a little different. Like, what if he brought Giannis here or even Kevin Durant,
right,
who's obviously not at that level anymore? I think it would be awfully hard of MLSE to move on if he had delivered his sort of white whale and Giannis in particular. So that's kind of a what if, we'll never know. But it's just, I think it would have taken something like that for him to stay on because there was really a desire for change at the top.
And that was going to be my question. That had to be the driving force here, is that powers that be, whoever they are, whether that's Bobby Webster or whoever, in tandem with other people, or if it's management, even above Bobby's pay grade, that were, looking just for a fresh start. But what I'm curious about now is, what does this mean for the Raptors moving forward? And then we'll get into the draft picks and we'll get into the personnel. But what does this mean in your mind, Ryan, with your expertise for the Raptors moving forward?
Well, I'd start off by saying I think very highly of Bobby Webster, the GM,
yes,
and Dan Tolzman, the assistant GM, vice president of player personnel. Like, I think they do a great job. Their track record speaks for itself. Like, other than a few years of stumbles, their draft record is right up there with just about any team in the NBA. And that's not all Masai, honestly. He started as a scout. He made his bones as a scout. He knows how to find players too, but it was a whole team. And Patrick Engelbrecht and the other people there, they do a really good job. So I think they're still in good hands as long as most of the people stick around, and we know a lot of them just signed new deals, so they should be. But that said, you lose more than just the scouting, the eye for talent with Masai Ujiri moving on. This guy's like a statesman. He presents himself. This is, as we said, not just they never won anything and they're always terrible, other than the Vince Carter, or the brief Vince Carter flashes, and maybe the Chris Bosh when they first sort of won the division for the first time. Like they never did anything. And he's a guy that said, look, you need to believe in this team. We are capable of it just like any other team, and we can do this, and then delivered on it. Like, Bobby Webster is not, or Dan Tolzman, they're quiet guys. They're not going to be out front, rah-rah. Like, they lost Tim Lewicki, who's about as flamboyant as the president of a corporation you can get, and now they lose because he was the head of Maple Leaf Sports Entertainment, and he brought in Masai, and he turned around Toronto FC and made them, for a while, the class of Major League Soccer. He won, he helped the Leafs farm team win a championship, and the Argos dominated the CFL for a while, in part thanks to him. And then, you lose him, but you still have Masai to fall back on, that passion, that confidence, that belief, and also that ability to sort of get board members on board with, hey, we need to spend this or do this because it makes sense, whether that's building a practice facility or, going for players or spending a bit more on management. And you lose that. You lost it with Lewicki, and now you lose that with Masai. So basically, I mean, like they can do a lot of the work of being GM and assistant GM, but I just think the presenting the Raptors, selling them on the players, all that sort of thing, like the face of the franchise is gone. You know, Kyle Lowry went a few years ago, and DeMar before that. Those guys were the faces. But I think Masai Ujiri, as much as anyone in the history even of Vince Carter, is when you think Raptors, you think of him. You probably think of him and Vince, maybe Kawhi, maybe DeMar and Kyle. But like losing a guy like that and not. It's not like they were signing great free agents ever anyway, but it's just if they're making a trade, it's easier to sell a guy on Toronto if you know Masai's there, I think.
Ryan Wolstat, Toronto Sun, joining us here on the Basketball Show. We're talking Toronto Raptors basketball. Ryan, talk about the NBA draft. What are your impressions of the two picks that the Raptors picked up?
Well, I think Colin Murray-Boyles was a bit of a surprise, even though he shouldn't have been, because they kept saying they were going to take the best player available, and a lot of people thought he was a top 5 talent in this draft, just in terms of the impact he has winning games. And I mentioned Lowry. I compare him to a guy like that who maybe doesn't look the part of an elite athlete, maybe a little thicker, a little rounder.
At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Ranked #1 in innovation for 10 consecutive years and #2 among public universities for employability, ASU isn't just ahead of the curve, it's creating new paths to success. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online, that's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
Maybe not jump out of the gym athlete, might have a skill or something missing, but these guys just win you games. And even A.J. Martin as well is a bit small for a shooting guard, but look, he just helped lead Florida to a national championship. He made another Final Four before he got there. Like, they're bringing in winners that they really look closely at the playoffs, at the teams that were doing well, at the Pacers and Thunder, the guys that aren't afraid to get their hands dirty, that are going to go and battle every possession. And get things done. And that's what they went over. They didn't go for a flashy, crazy athlete, even though Martin is a pretty crazy athlete as well. They went for guys that are just absolute dogs and that you should be able to count on them because they've been on the big stage and they've delivered. So it's interesting. I mean, he duplicates a lot of what Scotty Barnes brings, Murray Boyles. Not as talented, not quite as big, but very similar. His measurements were pretty similar to Barnes in a lot of ways, and they're very similar to Draymond Green. And I know everyone's always saying, well, we're looking for the next Draymond Green, an undersized center who can really pass, really defend, and kind of guard every position. And they're really hard to find. But if you get a four-man's Draymond Green, that's not too bad. And I think that can fit in nicely. And then when Barnes needs to get a rest at first, he'll be able to give you some of those things off the bench. You kind of get 48 minutes of that sort of player. And then looking beyond, they're hoping that maybe they can find a way to make it work together if you surround them with shooters.
He strikes me a little bit as a kind of a hybrid model of a combination of Draymond and PJ Tucker. Just a guy, like you said, a dog. It's nice to have a dog on your team. It's nice to have somebody that does the dirty work. And I mean, he's still a very effective scorer at the NCAA level. And the fact that one of the criticisms of his game is he's not a particularly good three-point shooter, that is a factor. And I think maybe a little bit of the surprise that I think that a number of people felt was to get a guy who really wasn't that kind of player when there clearly is a need for it. But it is good to have that in the rotation. Now, what one question I had, what does this do if the Raptors are committed? What does this do for the possible trades of other players? You hear RJ's name being batted around. What do you think this does? Who does this make it easier to think about possibly trading for other assets?
Yeah, they still need to figure out a way to balance out the roster. They do not have, like, one of the reasons I thought they might take one of the centers was, they kept saying we're not going to do for need because, again, we're taking the best player available. But they do not have a center beyond Jakob Poeltl, and they didn't even have a backup to Barnes, a suitable one. I mean, Jonathan Mogo's still a while away from being a productive NBA player if he ever gets there, and they also experimented with him playing the wing a little bit. So they didn't have really a backup 4 or a backup 5. So now with Murray Boyles, theoretically, you have your backup power forward, and they believe that he can guard some centers. So maybe he fits in there. They don't have a lot of money to spend on a backup center because they're already right at the luxury tax, and ownership has only paid it twice in 30 years, and now you've got a new Rogers taking complete control. Will they want to play? Will they want to pay it? So I think that's why people say, oh, RJ Barrett maybe makes sense. You move him in a deal that gets you a backup center or a piece that makes more sense, or a backup point guard, maybe just something, because you sort of have a logjam at shooting guard, because as it stands right now, you might even see Brandon Ingram playing a bit there if you want to get Murray, Boyles, and Barnes on the floor at the same time. You have Grady Dick, who the team really believes on. I'm not as high on him as a lot of people, but Jacoby Walter's another guy who I actually am very high on. I think he's going to be a really good player. So you have a lot of options at shooting guard. So that's where people say, well, maybe RJ makes sense to move. And also, he's got a couple more years on his contract, but you're already up at the tax. Can you pay all these guys if you're at best a team that might win a round of the playoff at best at this point? And even that's probably a stretch. Does it make sense to be over the luxury tax? So I think that's where it all comes from. And I think they are going to need to make some sort of move at some point, whether it's, I forgot about Ochai Agbaji is one of their only good shooters. He can also play some shooting guard and some small forward. So there's a bit of a logjam there. So one or both of Barrett or Agbaji probably have to go at some point just to get balance to the roster and kind of to get the payroll under control a little bit. I think that's what everyone's thinking right now.
What is the state of Brandon Ingram's health? Where is he at? Is he going to be ready to go 100% when the season starts?
Yeah, from what I've been told, he's doing well now. He's he'll be ready to go. He's on the court doing stuff. I think they could have pushed the issue and he could have played if they were in contention last year, but they wanted to be very careful and kind of maximize their draft pick, which didn't end up working out. But,
right.
But I think, from every indication I've gotten is they're ready to go and they're really excited about how he fits in, because everyone keeps bugging them about you're the second worst shooting team in the NBA, and they keep insisting, the Raptors, that this guy is, he might not shoot enough threes for anyone's liking, but in the mid-range, he's about as good as it gets. And he can really, really hit jumpers, and he's going to get a lot of open ones with the quality of the guys passing him. So, yeah, he's just about good to go, and they have no concerns about him for training camp.
I'm sure Raptor fans are really excited to hear that, because that was a bit of a strange trade, and to go an entire season and re-up Ingram as well, but we all know he can play. And I think one of the things, Ryan, and I'm curious on your opinion on this, one of the things that is finally coming back into fashion in the NBA is the mid-range game, and that, of course, largely due to Canadian SGA showing that this is such an important part of a winning games formula. So to have somebody like Ingram who can get that shot and make that shot, what a weapon to have and to add to this Raptor lineup.
It's effective. You just saw it with these finals. You can't have, everyone always copies and wants to do the same thing. And we've talked on the show before about not really liking the 3-point explosion, and everyone's just chucking up as many threes as possible.
Absolutely.
And you just saw two teams in Indiana and OKC that don't play that way. You talked about Shea, that's his bread and butter, the mid-range. Pascal Siakam, he's a better 3-point shooter now than he was on the Raptors, but his bread and butter is still the mid-range and getting into the paint. And there's still something that could be said for that. You still have a lot of success. Kevin Durant is still cooking at close to 40 years old, mostly from the mid-range. LeBron James, mostly from the mid-range. It is a weapon. If you're great at it, it's a real weapon, because all the schemes are built these days around stopping the 3-point attempts and stopping teams from getting into the paint. So if you have some guys that can really be on fire from the mid-range, that's a real effective weapon. I think the Raptors are going to have to rely on that, because they don't have a ton of reliable 3-point shooting, and as long as they're starting Barnes and Poeltl together, the shooting from anywhere is a major issue. But then again, Barnes has shown he could be a decent mid-range guy, as opposed to wait and see on his 3-point range.
I'm talking to Ryan Wolstat from the Toronto Sun here on the Basketball Show. I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to ask you a question about Grady Dick, but I have to tell you, whoever at Gillette made the decision that Grady was going to be their poster guy, it's just hard for me to believe the guy even shaves, much less would be the spokesperson for a razor. But I digress. Ryan, you're not as high on Grady Dick as other people are. Why?
It comes down to me that he was billed as the best shooter in that draft a few years ago, and we just haven't seen it at all. Not in the G League, not in the NBA. The form is beautiful. In warm-ups, it looks beautiful, but in games, it has not translated. And if he's not going to be that, what is he? He's really good at moving off the ball. He can get some open looks, but he hasn't been great at finishing at the rim. And to me, the biggest issue is if he's not going to be an elite shooter, like, you just can't really, can you be successful with him? Because he's probably the worst defender on the team right now. And they're a team built around defense, I know, so that helps cover for him a bit. And adding Murray Boyles and A.J. Martin's going to help too. But, what's the point of playing him over all the other guys you have on the roster if he can't defend? I mean, R.J. Barrett is a guy that gets flagged a lot for his defending, but he's just a lot bigger and stronger than Grady. And he made, I think, some significant strides defensively last year just by maybe trying a bit harder and using sort of his length and strength. And right now, Grady's still a pretty skinny dude. Not like a elite athlete. So yeah, the main thing is if he's going to be terrible defensively, he better be bringing it elsewhere. And it's not impossible. Like we said, at Kansas, he was insane as a shooter, and you don't just get billed the best shooter in the draft for no reason. Like, it's there, but he's going to really have to show a lot more, especially with a guy, in my opinion, in Jacoby Walter, that is every bit as talented, if not more. And maybe has some gifts elsewhere, and it actually has that dog mentality defensively. Like, they put him on a lot of really good players late last season, and he didn't look too bad doing that. So I think that would be why.
I look at Grady, and here's my one asterisk, because everything that you said, I completely agree with, and the numbers don't lie. But one thing I've never felt with the Raptors yet, and I love their coaching staff. I think they really try hard to get the most out of the talent that they have. I think they're adaptable. But one thing I have noticed that I would love to see is them commit to a shooter a bit more than they have, as opposed to the shooter being there. I still get the feeling from the Raptors that a shooter's role is primarily as a second or third option, as opposed to running things to get a good shooter shots. That would be the one thing I would love to see for Grady Dick, for him to be able to prove whether he can do this or not.
Well, that's a fair point, and I wonder if Brandon Ingram's presence will help if you play them together, because then you have a guy that is a bona fide NBA marksman that teams are going to be putting a lot of pressure on, and that's going to make it easier for Grady. And maybe you design some plays where Ingram's the primary threat, but Grady's there as the backup, and that gets him cooking. It's interesting. Like, he still gets a lot of gravity. Like, players really still run at him, and they're terrified of leaving him open, even though the shot hasn't fallen. So I do find that interesting. And a few of us, my colleagues in the media, have wondered, like, how long that's going to continue if they don't start falling. But I do agree, yeah, if they run some more stuff for him, it should be beneficial, and I would like to see that as well. But I do think having Ingram out there will make things easier, because really it's not been a lot of shooting around him in his 2 years in the NBA.
No, there really hasn't been, and their actions don't really emphasize it. And I know this enough about shooters, is that if your only role is that you'd better make this because you're only going to get 2 or 3 a game, that's a tough position to be in, and that's more suited to the D, the 3 and D player that can go into the corner, and that's the only shot that they're expected to take. And they seem to respond to that well, and then they're supposed to dog the ball. But a guy like Grady is the kind of guy you got to run off screens and you got to run actions for. That also should make Ingram's job easier as well. So I'm curious to see how the coaching staff adapts to it. And again, still comes down to whether they do or not, Grady's got to start hitting his shots.
And that, yeah, like you said, he is really good at, one of his real strengths is moving off the ball, getting himself open, cutting, all sorts of things. And you're right, they just haven't done a good enough job getting him the ball in those situations, because that is one of his major strengths. Like, I know some people said early on, like, look at how a guy like Peja Stojakovic played and maybe try to do a lot of that sort of thing. Not saying
totally
you can be a shooter like that, but Peja was great at getting open and moving around. He had that European style, and maybe there's even more to that Grady Dick can do, and definitely the Raptors can do a better job of getting him good looks.
Final question for you, Ryan. What is your prediction? What does your gut say the Raptors are going to look like next year? With the presupposition that they'll be relatively healthy for most of the season with their existing personnel.
I would wouldn't be surprised if they do a lot more. I think they'll be looking to some in-season stuff more. They do have all year to get under the luxury tax. So I think they'll be looking more trade deadline, that sort of thing. At that point, a guy like RJ Barrett would be with just like a year and a bit on his contract. O'Shea Baji needs a new deal, but I think he'll have value. So I think, like I said, one of those guys might go eventually, but heading into camp, I don't see a lot unless, I think they're going to try to look on the bargain market for a backup, a veteran center, and that might be just about it. Like, they have a pretty full roster right now. They're going to have a bunch of guys in Vegas Summer League competing for some G League spots or two-way spots. They have some unguaranteed contracts, so I don't think they'll be that different. But I think as is, assuming Ingram is able to stay healthy, I think, to me, they're absolutely a play-in team. Like, the East is taking a major step back. There are a lot of teams that have been really weakened, whether on purpose, with Boston selling off to get away from the taxes and the penalties and the aprons and all that stuff that I barely understand, but you got to be a math wizard to figure it out these days. But yeah, I think the Raptors, I think they're going to be, to me, they're a playoff team if healthy, because the East is down and they just need a little bit of help up front, and that's the thing.
Well, I think I share that same opinion, and I think it will be real exciting for Raptors fans to see the team more competitive throughout the season, and hopefully they'll start the flame back up for the team that's been fading since the championship. So exciting times. Ryan, thanks so much for joining me today. It's been really fun talking to you. I hope we can do this again soon.
Yeah, for sure. It was fun. Thanks for having me.
All right. Ryan Wolstat, Toronto Sun, joining us, talking Raptors basketball here on the Basketball Show. Going to take a break, and then it'll be closing time with Ryan and Paul. Welcome back. It is closing time on the Basketball Show. Saturday morning, your sports leader, Sports 1440, Paul Sir with Ryan Reed. Ryan, let's talk about the poll and where we're at.
What will Cooper Flagg and the New Look Mavericks achieve next season? The leader of that was playoff appearance. 56% of voters said playoff appearance was going to happen for them. Lottery was second place at 24%. Conference finals was 12%. And contender for finals was 8%. I think they got it right.
Yeah, I think so. The lottery as the second place is interesting to go from.
Well, I think I'd say more likely because lottery is just missing the playoffs. No, I think it's more likely they miss the playoffs than make the conference finals.
Yeah, fair enough. No, I think that's a safe assessment. Let's just put it that way. And I think we're all just really curious about Cooper Flagg when he gets into the league, the impact that he actually does have. And one of the things that happens oftentimes when players come out of the NCAA and they go into the NBA is, the response is really interesting in how their games translate. And I think one of the things that is in Cooper Flagg's heavy favorite is his game really should translate extremely well to the NBA style of play. So it's going to be very interesting. So we didn't touch on the KD trade to Houston. Ryan,
I'm going to give you the full trade here for.
Yeah.
So Houston acquired Kevin Durant, and they're actually discussing right now a 2-year, $112 million extension, which would basically make sure he retires a Houston Rocket. And in return, the Suns got Dylan Brooks, a Canadian guy, Jalen Green, as well as the 10th overall pick, which turned out to be Common Mulbuck, but the Suns then traded him to the Hornets for 2 picks. And then, that was the trade. It's an interesting one. What do you think, Paul?
Well, Phoenix is a train wreck. Like, they're one of the dumpster.
One of the teams of all time.
Yeah, they're one of the dumpster fires this year. And I don't know that they got it right. They probably had to do something because what they had invested in with the big three, with Beal, along with KD.
That Bradley Beal contract is
it's
no trade clause.
And a trade clause for a guy who is just terrible.
His agent needs a raise, like another raise.
Oh my God, yes, absolutely. And apparently not a particularly great guy in the locker room. And poor Devin Booker. I think Booker has been a real soldier there. This is all on the surface. I don't know anything about Booker personally at all, but he's been a soldier. He continues to play hard. He continues to be productive. Beal continues to be injured a lot. He has this no trade clause, which really is so stupid for a franchise to be hamstrung like that. But they had to do something. Jalen Green, always that high potential freakishly athletic guy.
Has some problems come playoff time. He was not very good last playoffs.
Well, and he had the one game in the 30s, and then he just disappeared.
He's like tour dates other than that.
Yeah.
Just 8 for 24.
And Dylan Brooks is a great role player. Like, he's tough. He's such a nice guy off the court, and he uses that WWE persona so effectively as a player. But I think he's a good acquisition for Phoenix. Certainly not a franchise player, but a good addition to what they're doing. So they probably had to do something. The grades that I've read mostly have said, heavily in Houston's favor. Now, having said that, they still have to sign Fred VanVleet. If they don't get VanVleet, what do they do at the point guard?
I think they gave him a 2-year.
Did they get a deal done with them?
2 years, $25 million a year.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So he took a pay cut,
that.
but he got an extra year on the contract.
Okay. All right. So now they got Freddie back. That's great. KD still can play. If he stays healthy, he'll be a real valuable asset. And they've got really nice pieces around him. So he will be able, I think, to be in a position, if he so chooses, to be an integral part, but not be relied on to have to score 30 a game. But he
can. At his age, he still could average 30, I think.
He maybe.
He's the only player in NBA history to average 25 or more points per game for 4 different franchises.
Yeah, he's an incredible scorer. Incredible when KD leaves the NBA, just like when LeBron leaves. You're really seeing generational players in the twilight of their careers. Definitely. But, I think for Houston, they're rolling the dice. They need a supernova to be able to compete in the Western Conference with OKC being what they are. So they need to do something special to be able to just be better. Because the thing about OKC, if everybody stays healthy, they're going to be a just nightmare for the next few years if everybody stays healthy. So for someone to beat them, they have to take a risk as long as they have a strong foundation, which Houston does. And Houston was a tough team last year. They've got some great defenders. They got some guys that can shoot it. They're big in the center. Shengun, yeah. Yeah, Shengun.
Well, they were a 50-something win team as a 2 seed, and they just added KD.
Yeah.
For their worst playoff performer. Like that's.
Yeah, it's going to be it's going to be really fun to watch, and it's great to see a franchise being willing to commit to compete and not just roll over, because in the West, the West is just going to be fascinating in general next year. Now, there were a couple of other trades, nothing of the level of KD, but there's a couple.
What would you grade this? Just quick fire as we wrap up here. Mark Williams got traded to the Suns for that one of those picks that they got.
I think it's a good move. I mean, Williams can play. He's not a franchise player, but he's a good 5-man. I think if the Lakers would have gotten him, that would have been really good for the Lakers. But the fact that the Suns added Brooks, Green, they're already better than they were last year along with Booker.
Next one, Jordan Poole will head out to New Orleans with Sadiq Bey for C.J. McCollum and Kelly Olynyk. To Washington.
I mean, to me, one of those trades.
Sidestep, lateral step.
What
there.
The hell did you do that for? It's like, why bother? Like, that just is such a weird trade. And New Orleans right now is just in such a weird state and in such a state of flux. So, and then didn't Lonzo Ball get traded
to Cleveland? To Cleveland for Isaac Okoro.
Again, another sidestep. We'll see if, the gamble, I guess, would be, can Lonzo regain some sort of relevance as a player that had a lot of potential coming out of UCLA?
And then a quick last 2, Drew Holiday for Anthony Simons in 2 seconds. And then Desmond Bey for all the firsts.
I'll tell you what, Miami, that's a bold move, but Bane's a real player. I feel for Drew Holiday to get dumped like that. I think that was hard on him and his family, but he's such a great guy. But Celtics have to dump salary, and his salary was huge, so they had to make a move. So just the way it went. We're wrapping up as we do every week with David's song by my son Ben and his band Worth Stays Down. Our family lost Ben over 2 years ago, and David, the song who this is a tribute to, lost his life tragically in a car accident. When you lose a son, when you lose a brother, it's the worst possible thing I can imagine. And you have to appreciate life and every day that you have. And you also have to look at how you deal with your fellow man. And I encourage everyone, treat everyone with kindness. We don't know the circumstances that others are in. Ben and David both were very kind people. and run out of their way to help those who are less fortunate. So I hope we can all do the same. Thank you for joining us this week. Great guests. Ryan, fantastic job. And we'll be looking forward to being back with you next week. Remember, Hoop City 3x3, July 31st to August 3rd, and World Cup 3x3, Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia. Canada women in the semifinals going up against the Netherlands, a powerful Dutch team, and as well Mongolia, coached by Steve Sir, going up against a very good Polish team. And in the men's side, all 4 teams are European. Europe dominates in 3x3. They can really play. But forced to be reckoned with, Steve Sir. He can really play and he can really coach. So
I've heard, yeah.
Yeah, he can. So thank you for joining us today. Been a lot of fun, and have a great week on and off the court. This has been the Basketball Show on your sports leader, Sports 1440.